Welcome to the session, Threats Inside the Darkverse, the shadowy underbelly of the metaverse. I'd like to welcome Newman Huck to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my talk, Threats Inside the Darkverse. So we're going to talk a lot about, metaverse, darkverse today, and I'm trying to wake you up. So this is the standard disclaimer from RSA. Please read it. Okay, to start off, who am I? My name is Numan. I'm a senior threat researcher with Trend Micro Research. I work for their forward-looking threat research team, which is like a research group under the Trend Micro Research umbrella. And we explore new technologies such as industrial Internet of Things, cloud technologies, 5G, smart cities, automotive, anything where there's upcoming technologies and we keep an eye on what the security issues will be in the future. Our team also does a lot of e-crime, and you'll see that from the presentation. And we're kind of trying to help curb the activities of cyber criminals. And we've collaborated with law enforcement in the past, and which led to some successful arrests. We're also an international team because the threats are global. So we have team members in about 12 or 13 countries. So wherever the threat is, we're there so we can try and understand. So enough about me, and let's get into the meat of it. So let's start with what is the metaverse. So what is the metaverse? So after World Wide Web, we think this is going to be another application layer of the internet. So when we were trying to define the metaverse, our team spent literally 1 to 2 weeks debating what is the correct definition. So I'm just quickly because we put a lot of work into it, I'm gonna quickly read this out to you a little bit. We think the metaverse is a cloud distributed, multi-vendor, immersive, interactive operating environment that users can access through different categories of connected devices, both mobile and static. And it uses Web 2.0 and Web 3.0 technologies to provide an interactive layer. Okay, that's a lot of mouthful, right? Basically, it's going to be the next version of the internet based on all the new technologies that are coming out. And because everybody's favorite topic is also ChatGPT, so I went and asked ChatGPT, okay, hey, what is the metaverse? And it came up with an almost identical, if not better definition for us in less than a second. And we were like, oh, so we spent almost 2 weeks working on this, and this guy just did it for us in a second. Yay, future. Okay. So, sorry. So I'm going to quickly play a clip. So basically, what the metaverse hopes to do is it's supposed to give people a lot more power over creativity, over creating content. And here's an example of, Tilt Brush is a virtual reality where users can, you're going to see a lot of user-driven creativity. And this is something that we expect to see in the metaverse is that, it's not just somebody building a world and you're playing in it. You will be in charge of your own data, and you'll be in charge of creating some of these worlds, right? So this is a small example of it. Another thing, okay. So, I'm just going to jump in the middle of it. Another thing that we're going to see, this is a demo of Unreal Engine, and it's running on either the PS5 or the Xbox, the new version of the Xbox. And what I'm trying to show you over here is that the graphics quality in these things are just incredible. Right? This particular example is showing you ray tracing and how the chip is actually calculating the path of each photon to make it more photorealistic. So the future metaverse, the virtual reality immersed or augmented reality version, some of them will have graphics which are extremely real. But it also brings us to another thing, is the PS5, when you run graphics like this on the engine itself, is going to superheat. You cannot possibly have a superheated device on top of your head. Your head will burn off, literally. So what the metaverse will actually look like, how much of it, how realistic you can make it look like in front of your eyes, is either through a desktop or through your glasses or an augmented reality. That's something that will be interesting to see. So very early on, the retailers figured out the metaverse or a virtual reality space was a great way, as a marketing platform. You could actually walk around. Here's an example from H&M. You can walk around, interact with some of these things that you're going to purchase, and take them in your hand, move them around, and look at it. It's much better than looking at it on a two-dimensional screen when you're doing like shopping on Amazon, for example, right? And everybody jumped onto this. Even Walmart had a version of this where, instead of, you kind of replicate the experience of walking through aisles and picking up stuff and looking at it. So these were very early on examples of this. Another big thing with the metaverse is we're going to see a lot of digital twins. So this is an example from the port of Hamburg in Germany, where they were experimenting with ways to visualize the large amounts of data fed to them by their thousands of sensors and measurements. And they were going to plot all of this into a digital twin version of their port. And this could help them plan maneuvers like, how to move the boats around or how to do cargo logistics. So basically, this, I think, is a more realistic version of the metaverse that we're going to see very quickly. And it's all about, mapping the actual world into a digital world, which you can, use, for example, with a digital twin like this, to do things. And I think this is the enterprise version of the metaverse that we're going to start seeing, or the industrial version of the metaverse that we're going to start seeing. So Accenture came up with a fairly nice definition of it. I'm just quickly going to read it. Metaverse, evolution of the internet that enables users to move beyond browsing to inhabiting in a persistent shared experience that spins the spectrum of our real world to the fully virtual and in between. It's a place to go where people can meet and interact, and where digital assets can be created, bought, and sold. So what we did was we simplified this definition, and we pulled out the meat of it, which basically says it's a new interactive application layer. And what we came out of it is the metaverse is going to be an internet of experiences. Cool. Now let's talk about hardware. So much of the metaverse that's promoted today that you'll see on videos and presentations, it's mostly derives from games, like massively multiplayer online role-playing games as an example. Classically, these games are mostly played on screens on a CPU, which has very good GPU support. But games are now starting to become more mobile, and the mobile platform also allows for augmented reality games such as Pokemon Go from Niantic. And I'm a big Pokemon Go player, and I use the augmented reality version of it. And the new Apple phone has LiDAR, so it can map devices and distances better. So it gives a more realistic experience. So as I was saying, this technology is also moving into the enterprise for productivity and gains. So combined with sensors, even this basic form of augmented reality offers ways to visualize data. I was watching a video the other day of how the F-35 is built, and not the F-35, sorry, how Mercedes actually does quality control on their final cars. And what they do is they put in a Microsoft HoloLens, which automatically shows them looks at the car, displays them what parts to look at, as well as an entire checklist of things to check before they approve the car. So augmented reality is going to be a big game changer for the industry, even for everyday people. We came to San Francisco in 2014 for a team meeting, and we visited at that time the Google Glasses office to try it out. And while it was impressive, it was also not very user friendly at that time. It was this little thing sticking in front of your eyes, and anybody who looked at you would think that you're videoing them. So, well, it was a leap forward, and it didn't ultimately come to market in the mainstream way that Google thought. So it was an interesting experience. Nowadays, what we're working is we're testing the Microsoft HoloLens 2, and we're looking for systemic threats, not as opposed to bugs. The other AR glass out there is Magic Leap 2, and they're both extremely good, but they're not ready for the mainstream. We recently did an experiment with HoloLens where I put on the HoloLens and I accessed my Office 365 account, and I just quickly took off the glasses and I gave it to my colleague. And the augmented reality glasses, the AR glasses, did not, re-scan the iris, and my colleague could actually start looking at all my documents, my emails, and could start sending stuff out. It's not a bug, it's not like a vulnerability, but it's a systemic security threat, right? So the other popular one, and this is actually where it's going big, simply because of the price point. The Oculus Quest 2. This is a very popular, headset, and these VR headsets provide the most immersive experience. And the Oculus Quest 2, my one cost, I think it was $299. I think it's a bit more expensive now. But it means that this is a device that most people can afford, and they can use it, and they can use that as like a medium for playing games or interacting with people. The problem with this thing, at least for me, is that when I put this headset on for more than an hour, I feel nauseous and I feel dizzy, and I have to take it off, and my head starts sweating. So they're big and heavy, right? Whereas, can we go back? Yes, whereas with the HoloLens, for example, it was more like when you look outside and you can see the world, the perception is a little different. It's not like you're stuck in a box. But obviously, the HoloLens cannot do graphics at the same level as, a Quest 2. Okay. So this is where we see the entire spectrum of immersion. So on the far end of immersion, we expect there's going to be VR, where we're fully immersed in the virtual world. AR itself has varying degrees of immersion and practicality. Proper reality augmentation, like the HoloLens that it's trying to achieve, is it's getting there, but right now it's a price point issue. Everybody can't just go ahead and buy a HoloLens. It's almost $5,000 Canadian. I'm from Canada. So the other thing is, where people can use augmented reality is on their mobile phones and tablets. Most of them, have a camera, a LiDAR, and it's a really good way to start, using augmented reality, right? So the metaverse needs to go further. Like even a small watch screen should be able to allow you to, access the metaverse. And another thing, a lot of people have AirPods now, and the latest generation AirPods have spatial sound. So even if you don't have visual, by putting on one of these things, you should be able to, be immersed in a world of sounds, and you'll feel like you're in a space, which is what spatial sound is trying to achieve. So the metaverse needs to combine all of these into a package that everybody can use in multiple different forms. Okay, we get into Web3 and the metaverse. So when Tim Berners-Lee came out with the web, it was basically interlinked text on servers on the internet. Then Web 2.0 came and was popularized by Tim O'Reilly, and basically it was about dynamic user-generated contents. And further developments of Web 2.0 are already going to various directions. So Tim Berners-Lee also proposed a linked semantic data web, specifically for data exchanges, and Web 3.0 is based on some of the semantic web technology and the concepts of pods and decentralized some of the data, right? So basically what Web 3 is hoping to do is hopes to decentralize the web, as well as marry it to a financial system. In this case, Bitcoins are like a ledger-based system, and then you have like a whole new way of interacting. And mostly what you're getting is you're getting data ownership, and you're getting data control, and maybe you're also sending bypassing the banking system. So there's really no reason for the metaverse to depend on Web3, on anything except the actual internet. But we like to think that it's going to use Web3 extensively, and why not? So let's assume for the rest of the presentation that the metaverse is largely going to be dependent on Web3. Okay, so in contrast to a homogeneous virtual world like Second Life or Horizon's world, the metaverse is meant to be a heterogeneous network of virtual spaces. But this is where things start getting complicated, right? So if you play a large RPG game right now, it's the company who has created the world who really control what goes into it and how you interact with it and what you can buy and what you can transact in it, right? Like, for example, if you're playing if you're playing, what was the really popular one? World of Warcraft, as an example. You can't just exactly take your assets and take it into another game, right? But what the metaverse is trying to do is that it's going to be interconnected. Like Meta can have a meta world, Microsoft can have a meta world, Google can have a meta world, and there'll be freedom to move assets from one universe into the other, and you do this potentially using blockchain technology, right? Using a distributed ledger helps establish ownership of assets, and technologies like IPFS, which is the, interplanetary file system, or ARweave allows for distributed storage. So the metaverse, as our original definition said, is going to be a collection of virtual spaces, and it's not a virtual space that all of them are interconnected, just like the internet, and you should be able to move your guitar, your digital guitar from Meta's metaverse to Microsoft's metaverse. So maybe you want to go sing a song in another metaverse, and you should be able to carry that along. How that mechanism will work, that's what we'll have to figure out. So Web3 is supposed to take back our internet and privacy, and the metaverse is supposed to, allow us to have a deeper and more meaningful interactions and experiences, right? Okay, that's the promise. But that's not the reality, right? Okay, back to reality. It's important to know that we have not been able to solve the problem of large corporations dominating the Web 2.0 space. And there's always when somebody dominates this, there's always the risk of losing your citizen rights in a space like this. So to build something like the metaverse requires an immense amount of investment, and it's mostly going to come from the private corporations. So it's a balancing game of where you own your data, but you also want all your rights, but also balance it out with a large corporation who's providing you the virtual space in which to do whatever you need to do, right? So basically, you own your stuff, but it doesn't solve the problem of brokering the assets from one metaverse space to another. And they could be different, they could be incompatible. Some worlds will allow bringing foreign items or avatars, but with more open metaverse for spaces coming out, which are going to be used for collaborative, this problem of moving assets from one space to the other needs to be solved. And blockchain transactions are, they're slow. You can use them, but they're slow. And is it fast enough? If I just want to jump from Microsoft's world to Google's world, do I have a 5-minute wait time? Do I have a 30-second wait time? Or do I have like 10 millisecond wait time? So this information, this transaction has to happen. Even if you're not like buying things, a transaction which clarifies that you're the owner of this asset and you're bringing it along from one space to the other has to happen. So we built a lot of these ideas, and now about the metaverse, and now let's start applying them to see what sort of threats there exist. So this is a quick video that shows, what is it, Minecraft being attacked. So we haven't been able to crack, security, which is why everyone is here in the RSA conference, trying to understand cybersecurity and how to stop it, right? So the Web3 metaverse doesn't suggest that we'll be able to solve it over there right away. It'll be a struggle for a long time. In fact, as long as metaverse spaces are based on gaming platforms, and the Log4Shell incident from last year showed us that how vulnerable these things are. Like, for example, this is Minecraft being hacked, right? So what I want to say is that the metaverse is going to be built on technologies currently here. So any vulnerability that you have now is going to translate into the next metaverse space. Metaverse spaces are running on ordinary IT hardware, and thus they're susceptible to IT attacks. If they're running on a cloud platform, any cloud attacks that exist today will exist in the future. Stuff like DDoS for extortion, ransomware of assets, all of these things are going to happen. Things like, okay, so this is where it starts getting more interesting. When you put on your headset, for example, with the HoloLens, it does an iris scan of my eyes to make sure that this is me, instead of fingerprint or the facial thing. So in addition to all the data that's going out, your biometric data that you're using to authenticate is also at stake. I told you how the HoloLens, we put it on our head, it scanned my iris, gave me access to my Office 365 files, and I just quickly took it out, gave it to my colleague, and he could access it. And he could access it after 5 more minutes. It didn't do a rescan. In this case, the iris scan was not stolen, but in the future, how do you know that somebody's not going to take that out and then send it as a hash for logging into a space? Also, new metaverse APIs and protocols will come up, so there will be new protocols that are not in existence today, or like new API sets. And as you know, with anything new, there's going to be vulnerabilities, and until they're matured or they're found out, and hackers, everybody are just going to have a field day when these things come out. We can't wait to iron out all the things, all the issues, or else we'll be waiting 20 years. But so it will be a learning experience, and that's basically what I wanted to tell you. So basically, the other thing is that in an augmented reality application, these IoT devices that we're going to be interacting with, they'll also be susceptible, or they could also be a conduit for attacks against a metaverse space. What that looks like it's still to be determined. So as I mentioned, targeting games, we did a research back in 2019 just looking at all the popular games, and again, this is old stuff, but we found out in 2019 the games they were exploiting vulnerabilities. I think one of the oldest vulnerabilities was from 2010, 2010. So they were using old vulnerabilities to attack in 2019, right? Some of these vulnerabilities will get patched, some of them are not patched, but there was a lot of malware targeting these, and they were using this to steal gaming data, steal assets or coins that you bought inside the gaming verse. Some of them were using it to create characters and bump those characters up in levels and then resell those characters. So interesting thing. Another thing that we looked at recently is interplanetary file systems. And this is supposed to be a globally distributed file system for storing your assets. And we were quite surprised and alarmed as to how much malicious activity IPFS was getting versus its legitimate uses. So the problem with owning an asset, you bought an NFT, you bought what was this, the gorilla one that's very popular? See, when you buy an NFT, what you're basically buying is, you are buying, a certificate which says you are the owner of that NFT, but you don't necessarily have control over its storage, right? So basically it says that I own the NFT, but if that NFT is, for example, stored in a file server somewhere, somebody could ransom it, encrypt it and ransom it, and then while you own the NFT, you might not be able to access your NFT. It's an interesting concept, isn't it? So if they, for example, ransom all your assets because even though you own it, you are now left with a big dilemma, right? Basically, the NFT is a pointer to some asset server and hopefully a hash of it, so there's nothing stopping an attacker from compromising. So the favorite solution to this was to use IPFS, but that for distributing it and saving the NFT in multiple servers or in a globally distributed file system. But that will cost you extra crypto money to save it, right? Okay, now continuing with this thing. If your intention is to protect your assets from misuse, this is hard too. So a 1-bit change will make it a completely new, different asset. It might look exactly the same to you, but it's going to look completely different. And especially if somebody takes your NFT, changes a few bits so it looks exactly the same, they can start using it. So we need laws and regulations around this to determine how much an NFT has to change before it becomes somebody else's property. Okay, so it will, when the metaverse embraces blockchains, it will normalize the use of cryptocurrencies. There's a huge volume of e-commerce transactions in the metaverse, which will be a magnet for criminals and criminal groups who try to take advantage of users and steal their money and digital assets, right? So once you start normalizing cryptocurrencies, you're gonna have so the thing with cryptocurrencies, right now, everybody knows about Ethereum and Bitcoin, but the real way, corporations will start making money is if they start issuing their own cryptocurrencies, vendor-specific. We already have that in, games nowadays. For Pokemon, I buy, Pokemon coins with actual money, and then I can use that to buy, game assets in there. So, but think of this from beyond a game into a metaverse where you buy whatever currency from the vendor, and then you use that to purchase items inside that thing. And again, some of these currencies can move from one metaverse space to the other. So you now have, something beyond blockchain doing lots and lots of stuff, right? So the publisher of these digital currencies will also be, subject to getting defrauded or, laundering money. And we think, everyday financial crimes like Ponzi schemes, which prey on the financially unsophisticated, will come up, right? The other thing with, digital assets is that you can boost the value of digital assets by, fake recommendations. You can do stuff like, endorsements and investments in pump and dump schemes, right? And my favorite is, the valuation of virtual land. So suppose you go into one of these asset servers and you find out Snoop Dogg bought a land, and then you want to buy a land right beside Snoop Dogg's land, right? And the value of that land will increasingly go up. So a lot of that is, again, just like in real life, based on speculations, speculating that how this piece of land, a virtual piece of land that you own, is going to go up in value or can be used in the future. So privacy. We haven't solved privacy in Web 2.0. Anybody thinks we solved privacy in Web 2.0? No. Okay. So do you think we're going to solve privacy in the metaverse using Web 3.0? I don't think so. So when you go into somebody's meta world, this company or this group or whoever, they control the entire world, if that's the right word to use it. And you're going to basically have ubiquitous wiretap. Everything you do is subject to unlimited surveillance. You're moving in their digital world, they know what you're going to do. They know what you're seeing. They might know what you're talking about. So privacy and tracking will become more extreme. It'll become basically the Wild West and free for all till any laws are in place. And another thing is data sovereignty. We're already facing this issue with data sovereignty nowadays, and this is going to be even more problematic in the metaverse, where it's supposed to be a global thing where you can move from place to place and move your assets around. So what happens to data sovereignty? Does it just go out the window? We also have, virtual reality and augmented reality devices tracking your iris or tracking your, facial expressions or your, or it could be tracking like even maybe your fingerprints, your voice, many different things, right? So, all these traits are actually somebody now knows what your eyes look like, or somebody knows what your voice sounds like. Somebody knows what are what's your facial structure, because they're using these for making transactions or authentication, et cetera, et cetera. They already know a lot about you, and they'll know even more about you. So, criminal actors will start looking for vulnerable groups of people misuse. They'll start looking for vulnerable groups of people who are, sensitive to certain topics, and talking about them, dropping directed narratives against them will influence them. We've already seen this happen during the last election, and a place like the metaverse will be a very easy place for people to gather around the world and chat literally in person. So they could basically these will create many new challenges around the world, especially around politics, around issues that matter, right? And we think this is the topic. The darkverse, this is going to be a criminal space or even a terrorist space, and this is where we're going to start seeing a lot of this happening. So, getting to the darkverse. I'm going to read off the slides a little bit over here. The darkverse is like the dark web, but except it exists in the metaverse. In some ways, it's more dangerous because of the pseudo-physical presence of the users, right? It's like me and you talking face-to-face, but in a virtual world, but me and you talking face-to-face. It can mimic clandestine, physical meetings versus, going into forum, writing stuff out in an open discussion forum. So maybe when I'm in a darkverse room, whatever I say to you doesn't get recorded. But if I'm talking to you in a chat room, whatever I'm talking to you about gets recorded someplace by someone. So the darkverse lives inside the deepverse, which is the unindexed part of the deep web. So we think the darkverse is going to be a collection of underground metaverse spaces. Some will be used purely for criminal spaces, where they can meet and plan stuff. And some might be even used for extremists. Also, it will be a place for illegal pornography, as well as stuff like harassment, all this stuff happening. But how this translator will look like in a three-dimensional world is still not clear-cut. So I'm very quickly going to switch context a little bit, and I'll get back to why I said that. So has anybody played Microsoft Flight Simulator? Okay, it's a great game, and it helped me, relive the sense of traveling from 2020 to 2022. And does a really remarkable job of, simulating the entire globe. So in the future, think of, sophisticated meta worlds, maybe one run by Microsoft or Google, who own an incredible amount of data, where we'll almost have a 1:1 mapping of the world that users can explore, right? So these are some of the screenshots that I've captured from a popular virtual world called VRChat. So given the 1:1 mapping to the real world, together with the user imagination, we saw the video in the very beginning on create user content, be creative. So it will be a very exciting and strange place. And here's why I say this. So having a world which almost looks like the real world and is massive means a darkverse space could be sitting in the 11th floor of building X in city Y, and the only way you can get to that is, you have to walk through this door, and then you're sent through a portal into another, building, and then you go in there. I know this all sounds science fiction, but in a place like the metaverse, you can do whatever you want. So these things could be hiding in plain sight, but is law enforcement going to go and knock on every door in this world trying to find out, is this like a dark space? So it's very complicated, right? As you grow bigger and create more assets, it's more places for it to hide. And because it's it mimics the real world, it's almost like a hidden room in a hidden building. What if like there was a, a criminal underground place in San Francisco? Am I going to go knock on every door looking for it? It's just going to be like that in the metaverse. So as I think I mentioned before, like harassment already exists in the metaverse, and here's some examples that I found. So it's really hard to wrap your head around sexual harassment done to an avatar in the metaverse, but what we found out is that the psychological effect on the user is still the same, and it's very damaging, right? So how do we stop this? How do we police this? And at the same time, while I say how do we stop this and police this, you want to also make sure the users have their freedom to do things that they choose to do, right? So, not an easy problem. So we dug, and we found out this article from 17 years ago when Second Life was very popular. So, again, excuse me, but basically what it says that rape for sale, and the ad says, what's the fun of enjoying your Second Life and Second Life with a little bit of ultraviolence? And then they go into details about, fantasies and multiple options. So these disturbing traits, like these problems, they existed in the past. This is from 17 years ago. And they'll exist in the future too, right? So if history is going to teach us something, we're going to have issues. Pornography is rampant in Web 2.0, so there's no surprise that will exist in Web 3.0 or the metaverse. And these sites already do a really poor job of preventing underage users from accessing these sites or exploring different things. So imagine now in the metaverse, it's no longer two-dimensional, it's three-dimensional, and everybody's doing a poor job of deciding who can access these sites or not. I really feel like I have a small daughter, and I've decided I'm not going to give her any computers. She barely gets an hour of TV nowadays, and I think that's a good way of going about this. I'm not trying to scare you, but this is going to be the reality of it. So one of our colleagues in Taiwan is a big user of VR chat, and he spent hundreds of hours in there. So he now has these things, he's got street creds, right? So it means he gets invited into exclusive events. So when we created our VR chat account, we couldn't access any of these things. So we had to borrow his account to go to some of these exclusive meetups where they discuss strange things. And you're not typing, you just walk up to an avatar and you talk to them. And just like I would walk up to you and I talk to you, right? And so these exclusive events will happen. They'll be invite only. And for somebody like law enforcement, it'll be very difficult to infiltrate these unless they have street cred and they're known to these people. Just like you would infiltrate, go undercover and go after a criminal gang nowadays. But these all exist in the metaverse. This is an example of a clean marketplace where they were discussing programming CO2 detectors for a what do you call that? A server called Node-RED, which you can use to run things in your smart home as well as in industrial settings. But the reason I put it up here is that nowadays, when you go to an underground forum, and as I said, our group does a lot of law enforcement activities to find out underground chats and stuff like that. So we see a lot of underground forums and how they, promote the services and things that they sell. But in the future, you could, just like you saw Walmart and H&M, you could have interactive marketplaces where you can try out code, look at things. Just the way the retailers are going to use these underground virtual marketplaces, maybe selling illegal stuff, will have a different way of presenting their data and more interactive. Why not? If everybody's using it, they might as well just copy it, right? So I'm going to summarize a little bit over here. So the Darkverse was kind of created for conducting illegal or criminal activities. So actually, I'm going to dig down to one that we thought was very interesting. So we think one of the ways the Darkverse could be accessed is maybe to access that particular portal, you need to be within a physical space. So when you're within a physical space, maybe a 200-meter radius or a 200-yard radius, only when you're in there and your GeoIP confirms it, can you portal yourself into one of these Darkverse rooms. So if law enforcement is trying to infiltrate that, unless they're within that circle, the 200-meter circle or 200-yard circle, they can't even access it. So it's like another way of authentication, right? So unless you're one of them or you're in a particular city, you can't access this. I'm not going to go through all of these things, but that was one of the things that we thought was very cool. And these rooms could be in plain sight, but if you don't know how to access them, you won't know how to get into them or police them. So very quickly, the metaverse concept is fluid. It started out as an idea by a science fiction writer, and now in the 90s, and today it's a multi-billion-dollar vision for big tech companies. So as new technologies like AR, VR, IoT, AI and machine learning, large language models, blockchains, IPv6, spatial web, etc., all of these, as they're being created, a new interactive layer was needed that integrates all of these technologies, basically creates a new internet. While it promises to be a game changer, but it's still going to face stiff competition from the globally established smartphone market. But it's not all doom and gloom. I know we've talked about a lot of doom and gloom scenarios. So the technology is in its early stage of development. And given all the lessons that we have learned from today's internet, we can start building technology, solutions, services, and most important, legislation that make it, make the metaverse safe and easy for everyone to use, right? So the key goal is to identify the problems very early on, then start thinking about solutions. So when this becomes reality, we can hit the ground running. Quickly like to acknowledge the other members of the team. There's Roel, Morten, Phil, and myself. So thank you very much. Questions, metaverse or metaverse?
Yes, I wanted to ask about what you think the role of zero-knowledge proofs and technologies built on them have with helping with privacy potentially.
So zero-knowledge, I'm glad you mentioned zero-knowledge proofs, because we've been working on trying to figure out if an asset moves from one metaverse world to another metaverse world, how do you quickly scan it and decide whether that thing is safe or not to move from your metaverse to his metaverse, right? For example, that's where we think zero-knowledge proofs is actually going to be very useful, because you need to very quickly, in milliseconds, literally determine whether I'm going to allow you and your virtual assets into my space or not. So I think that's going to be very important. I think that's one of the places where zero-knowledge proofs will actually have an application. And again, we've been recently working on trying to sort this out, how we can do that. Do we have just 1 second. Do we have an audit body, or do we have a signer for assets, like your virtual guitar? Is it signed by my company, and does his metaverse trust the signing I did to my company, which also guarantees that the code hasn't changed in transit? And one of the ways without looking at it would be using a zero-knowledge proof graph.
Hi, Numan. Thank you for your talk.
Thank you.
I have a question regarding harassment in the metaverse. I'm wondering, what do you think we should do in order to combat harassment, particularly in the metaverse? Should we, for example, follow similar strategies that have been used on social media, or do you think they don't work really well with moderators? Thank you.
Okay, so this is an interesting question, and okay, let me phrase it this way. The metaverse owner will have a great big role to play in this. So whoever creates the metaverse world you're in, determines up to how much you can interact with me. Can I come up to you and hit you on the head, you're my avatar, your avatar, or we can only come within 2 feet of each other? Can we, if somebody's harassing us verbally, can we mute them out? So these are some of the, early on, what do you call that, anti-harassment strategies people are talking about. And I think one of the ways to prevent harassment, because you own the world and you control every aspect of it, so the owners or the people who are going to develop the corporations, they're going to have a big role to play on how much you can interact while giving your freedom, but without, harming somebody else. Can my avatar come and grab you? If it's not possible to do that in that space, then the chances of that happening will be greatly diminished. Can I block you so that you cannot come into any of my spaces or come within, 100 feet of me? So again, you have to think of this harassment in terms of both virtual as well as physical interaction in a virtual world.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lucy Thompson. Fabulous presentation.
Thank
Have
you.
you and your team started thinking about what kind of legislation or rules would be good? You mentioned maybe new laws might be needed. What kind of things would be good?
So, okay, so this, when you talk about laws, it becomes a little, there's two things to say here. We know law enforcement, several groups, several international groups are already, working on this. They have, expert groups working on these where they're trying to come up with, define what the problems are going to be, and then, and then basically tell local governments that what rules need to be created. Now, here comes the second part, is that because of the global nature of the metaverse, every country will have their own similar rules. And depending on, the level of democracy, let's say, for example, in that country, different governments will have different, they have their own agendas, right? It's just like, you have tax havens. They know, and rich people move their money into tax havens because those countries are not going to allow other countries information about them. So it kind of becomes like this. So maybe a country will exist where it's fine to do whatever you want as long as you're paying out the government, but it's not right in other places. So because of the global nature of the metaverse, these laws, most of the developed world are crafting, working on these ideas, trying to come up with the legislations or the things that it should be aware of, but other countries are not going to do anything about it. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. No more questions? Okay. Going once, twice, thrice. Thank you.